Close your eyes and start with thoughts of goodwill. Goodwill is a wish for happiness, true happiness. Because true happiness comes from within, your true happiness doesn't have to conflict with anyone else's. And it's good to think about where true happiness comes from. It comes from our actions. So when you extend thoughts of goodwill to yourself, you're basically saying, may I understand the causes for true happiness and be willing and able to act on them. When you extend goodwill to others, the same thought. May they understand the causes for true happiness and be willing to act on them. You're not saying, may you be happy simply doing whatever you're doing. Because some people are doing some pretty horrible things. The goodwill for them would mean hoping that they see the error of their ways and voluntarily change their ways. And that's a thought you can have for anybody without hypocrisy. So start with thoughts of goodwill for yourself. And then extend them to others. Start with people who are close to your heart, your family, your very close friends. May they find true happiness too. And then extend those thoughts out in ever-widening circles. People you know well and like. People you like even though you don't know them so well. People you're more neutral about. And people you don't like. Remember that the world would be a much better place if everyone could find true happiness within. Spread thoughts of goodwill to people you don't even know. And not just people, living beings of all kinds. East, west, north, south, above and below, out to infinity. May we all find true happiness in our hearts. Now bring your attention to the breath. Take a couple of good long, deep in and out breaths. And notice where you feel the breathing process in the body. Because when we talk about breath, we're not talking about the air coming in and out through the nose. We're talking about the energy in the body that flows. Brings the air in, lets the air go out. And you can feel that energy lots of different places in the body. So find any one spot where it's clearest, where you're most sensitive to the breathing process, and settle your attention there. And then ask yourself how long breathing feels. If it feels comfortable, you can keep it up. If it doesn't feel comfortable, you can change. Make it shorter, more shallow, heavier, lighter, faster, slower. Experiment for a while to see what rhythm and texture feels best for the body right now. Energizing when you're tired, relaxing when you're tense. your mind wanders off after some thinking, just drop the thinking. Come back to the breath. Think about the breath. And no matter how many times it wanders off, just keep bringing it back, bringing it back. The fact that you can catch it is a good sign. You're developing your alertness, your ability to see what you're doing as you're doing it, and you're developing your mindfulness, keeping in mind the fact that this is where you want to be, here with the breath. You're also developing a faculty called ardency, which means you're trying to do this well. So each time you come back, reward yourself with a breath that feels especially good. And that way you'll be more and more inclined to want to come back. If there are any pains in the body, don't pay any attention to them right now. Pay attention to the parts of the body that you can make comfortable by the way you breathe. Now there is a tendency as the breath gets comfortable to start focusing on the sense of comfort and forgetting about the breath. So to counteract that tendency, which basically destroys your concentration, the next step is to be aware of the whole body as you breathe in, the whole body as you breathe out. And a good way to build up to that whole body awareness is to go through the body first, section by section, to familiarize yourself with how the breathing process feels in some unexpected parts of the body. Start down around the navel. Locate that part of the body in your awareness and watch it for a while as you breathe in, breathe out, to see what rhythm of breathing feels good there. If you sense any tension or tightness in that part of the body, allow it to relax, so that no new tension builds up as you breathe in, and you're not holding on to any tension as you breathe out. And now move your attention up to the solar plexus, the area right in front of the stomach, and follow the same 3 steps there. 1, locate that part of the body in your awareness. 2, watch it for a while as you breathe in, breathe out to see what rhythm of breathing feels good there. And then 3, if there's any tension or tightness in that part of the body, allow it to relax. Think of it dissolving away in the breath. Now bring your attention to the middle of the chest and follow the same steps there. And now bring attention to the base of the throat. And bring your attention to the middle of the head. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering not only through the nose, but also through the eyes, the ears, in from the back of the head, down from the top of the head, going deep into the brain. As you breathe out, think of it radiating out from the head in all directions, working through any patterns of tension you may feel around the forehead, the eyes, the jaws, the back of the neck, and dissolving those patterns of tension away. Now bring your attention to the back of the neck. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there from the back, and then going down through the shoulders, the arms, the wrists, the hands, out to the tips of the fingers. And as you breathe out, think of it radiating out from all those parts of the body into the air. Now keeping your attention focused at the back of the neck. This time as you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there and then going down both sides of the spine, down to the tailbone. As you breathe out, think of it radiating out from the entire back into the air. And move your attention down to the base of the spine. As you breathe in, think of the breath energy entering there and then going down through the hips, the legs, ankles, feet, toes. And as you breathe out, think of it radiating out from all those parts of the body into the air. Now that completes one cycle in the survey of the body. If you were meditating on your own, you could go through the body as many times as you like, at whatever pace you like. But right now, choose one spot in the body where it seems most congenial to stay focused. Then think of your awareness connecting all the parts of the body to that one spot. So you're aware of the whole body breathing in, the whole body breathing out. Allow the breath to find whatever rhythm feels good. Your only duty right now is to try to maintain this sense of centered but broad awareness. It may have a tendency to shrink, especially on the out-breath. So keep reminding yourself each time you breathe in, whole body. Each time you breathe out, whole body. No, I invite you to continue meditating as I give the talk. Back in the days of the Buddha, people would meditate during the Buddha's talks. They got a lot more out of them than just sitting there watching him. There's a story about Venerable Ananda, who was the Buddha's attendant, and how he gained awakening. During the Buddha's life, he had become a stream enterer, which means he had his first glimpse of the deathless, but he didn't complete his work on the path. It wasn't until after the Buddha died, the monks were going to have a council to go over the Buddha's teachings, to give a standardized version of what he taught. And they realized that Ananda knew more about what the Buddha taught than anybody else. So even though all the other members of the council were arahants, they wanted Ananda to join them as well. Well, Ananda thought, well, it's not appropriate. They're arahants, I'm not an arahant, so I should practice hard. So he practiced hard on the very last night before the council. He was practicing mindfulness immersed in the body. And he didn't get the results he wanted. So at one point he decided to lie down. And as he was lying down, he wasn't sitting, he wasn't lying down, he was halfway between. He gained full awakening. Now there's an interpretation of the story, which was that he gained awakening because he gave up his desire for awakening. He abandoned his efforts, and at that moment he gained insight. And it's a popular story because many of us come to the Dhamma. We come from a world in which there's a lot of desire that we have to deal with, our desires, other people's desires. We have to make a big effort to be productive. That's what the society wants out of us. So it's good to come to a teaching we think that where there's no desire, there's no effort. You can just be. As if the rules of the world were different. As I said earlier this evening, it's kind of like the reverse version of Barney the dinosaur. If you don't want something strong enough, it's going to come. But that doesn't fit in with, one, what the story says. The story never says that he stopped meditating as he was lying down. He was continuing to meditate. It also doesn't fit in with the fact that of the various parts of the canon that discuss the role of desire on the path, it's usually Venerable Ananda who's giving the talk. There's one talk where he is talking to a nun. And he mentions to her that it's one of the purposes of the practice is to get rid of craving, but you need to use craving in order to get there. In other words, you have to have the desire, I really want this. Because we are working on a skill. And if you work on a skill and you don't want to master it, it's not going to happen. You may know William James made the distinction between two kinds of truth. There's the truth that if you want things to be a certain way, it's not going to allow you to see the truth. Think about the orbits of the planets. For a long time they wanted the orbits of the planets to be circles, because a circle is perfect. It wasn't until Kepler discovered that no, they're not circles, they're ellipses. We actually were able to get an accurate idea of how the planets revolve around the sun. So those are truths in which your desires get in the way. There are other truths, though, that will not become true unless you want them to be true. In other words, if you want to learn how to play the piano, you have a chance to become a good piano player. If you don't want to learn how to become a piano player, you're not going to do it. And the path is a truth of the second kind. You have to want it in order for it to succeed. In fact, as the Buddha said, all things in the world are rooted in desire. There's only one thing that's not rooted in desire. That's not a thing, it's nibbana. That's the ending of things, ending of phenomena. But everything else, good, bad, that we experience, is rooted in desire. Which means that all of our experience has what you might call an arrow in it. We put our experience together, and I'll talk more about this later. We put our experience together out of desire. And the question is, when are our desires skillful and when are they not? This relates to a second image that Ananda gave. A Brahmin came to see him one time in a park. And the Brahmin asked him, what is the goal of this path that you're following? And Ananda said, one of the goals is to put an end to desire. And the Brahmin asked, well, how do you do that? And Ananda taught him what are called the 4 bases for success. Concentration based on desire, concentration based on persistence, concentration based on intent, where you give your full attention to it, and concentration based on using your powers, your powers of analysis. And the Brahmin said, well, in that case, this is an impossible path. It's an endless path, because you can't put an end to desire by using desire. And then I said, well, let me give you an example. Before you came here to this park, did you want to come? Yes. Now that you're at the park, what's happened to that desire? Well, the desire is gone because I'm here. And I said, in the same way, as you're practicing the path, you have to want to get to the goal. And when you finally do achieve the goal, then your desire gets put away. So the desire is not going to end until it's been satisfied. We can think of the Buddha prior to his awakening. He wanted to find something that was deathless. There was no birth, no aging, no death. But as he noticed, if you simply want that to happen, you're actually going to suffer. The more you want it, you just simply wish for it to happen. It's not going to happen. You're going to suffer from there. But he didn't say, well, don't just stop. He didn't say to stop wanting it. He basically said, find the right method. This is why when they have short explanations of the Buddha's awakening, it gets boiled down to a principle of causality. It's called this, that, conditionality. The basic principles are 2. One is that there are some causes that when the cause arises, the effect is going to arise at the same time. And when the cause goes away, the effect is going to go away. You might think of sticking your finger in a fire. As soon as you stick it in, it's going to burn. As soon as you pull it out, it stops burning. The other type of causality is causality over time. You do something now and it can have an influence. It can go on for quite a while, even though the current or the original impetus is stopped. You think of planting a seed. You plant the seed now, it's going to take a long time for that tree to grow, or whatever the plant is going to be. But because the seed is impermanent, the tree itself is going to be impermanent too. Someday the tree is going to have to die. You put these 2 principles together, and what you have in the present moment is the fact that what you're experiencing now is the result of 2 types of causes. Causes from the past, causes in the present moment. Causes in the present moment don't have to be influenced by causes from the past. They can be free. This is what makes it possible to develop a skill. This is what makes it possible to find a path to the end of suffering. What it does is these causes in the present moment, these intentions in the present moment, take potentials that come from the past and turn them into your actual experience of the present moment. So we're dealing with, not just dealing with things as they are. We're dealing, as the Buddhist terms it, things as they have come to be. In other words, something has arisen, potential arises from the past. Many times you have many potentials at any one moment. You can choose which one of those potentials you want to develop. The Buddha gives the analogy of planting a seed in a field. You have a field with lots of different seeds. And the seeds that you water are going to be the ones that are going to grow. And so where you pay your attention to what potential is coming in from the past, and then what you do with them is going to be making the difference between whether you produce something good or something bad. It's like being a cook. You can go into the kitchen, and some days there's good raw materials, good vegetables, whatever in the kitchen, and other days there are bad ones. And if you're a good cook, you can make good food out of anything. If you're a bad cook, you can take really good ingredients and make a mess. I have a student who was a cook in Singapore one time. He was working in the British Club, and they had a fixed price meal one day. and one of the dishes was going to be asparagus soup. Well, it turns out more people came than they expected, and they ran out of asparagus soup. And so he said, okay, everybody out of the kitchen. And they went into the garbage and got all the asparagus peels, put them in a blender, made a good bechamel sauce, and made asparagus soup. So this is the principle that the Buddha is making use of as we develop the path, that we have good and bad influences coming in from our past. But the Buddha didn't say, okay, I'm going to teach the end of suffering only to people who have good karma. Whether your karma from the past is good or bad, I will teach you how not to suffer from it. That's the skill we're working on. So he says it's a matter of the right method. There's another time when a monk was asked by a prince, does wishing get you to the end of the path? And the monk said, well, simply wishing will not get you to the end of the path. You have to use the right method. He was basically taking the principle of the Buddha's own discovery. The Buddha wanted to put an end to suffering. He was able to find the path to the end of suffering because he understood causality. Once you understand causality, then you can direct your desires in the right way. You direct them on the causes that will lead to something that is skillful, away from the causes that will not. So instead of just wishing, you have to use the right method. And so the monk then, after answering the question, went to see the Buddha, said, did I give the right answer? The Buddha said, yes, you gave the right answer, but you could have given some similes that would help make the point clear. And then the Buddha himself gave some similes. One of them is, you want milk out of a cow, and so you're twisting the horn, and it's not going to give you any milk. And you get frustrated. What's wrong with this cow? I'm trying hard, and it's not giving me any milk. And then finally you say, well, I'll stop twisting the horn. And you decide, hey, not twisting the horn is really nice. I'm relaxed, I'm not harassing the cow. So I'll just sit here and I'll have cow awareness. Okay, well, it's nicer than twisting the horn, but you're not getting the milk. And so that's what the path is all about, is understanding causality. You pull on the udder and you're going to get the milk. In the same way as you're practicing the path. It is a path based on desire. Again, as I said, the Buddha said all things are rooted in desire. And it's not just bad things. We sometimes hear that, okay, the cause of suffering is craving. And so we decide, well, it must be the case that all desire is bad. It's not the case. The Buddha said 3 types of craving are going to cause suffering. 1 is craving for sensuality. 2, craving for becoming. 3, craving for non-becoming. Craving for sensuality. The term sensuality here in the Buddha's usage means basically your fascination with your sensual fantasies. You can think of a meal that you would like, you can think of a place you would like to go, you can think of a person that you would like to kind of have a relationship with, and you can fantasize about these things. And we're stuck more on our fantasies than we are on the actual object. You see this again and again. I mean, this is why relationships are bad, or can go bad. You have a fantasy about the other person. It has nothing to do with the other person, but you're trying to impose that fantasy on the other person. We're more attached to the fantasy than we are to the object. And so craving for that kind of mental activity is going to cause suffering. Because we're putting ourselves in a position where we're trying to find happiness out of things that either can't provide it, or out of things that are not really under our control. If our happiness or sensual pleasure depends on somebody else, they can take it away at any time. So that's one of the causes of suffering, is craving for sensuality. Then there's craving for becoming. Becoming means basically taking on an identity in a world of experience. You have a sense of who you are in a particular world. That world of experience is usually centered around a particular desire for a particular object or aim. And then you see the world in which that aim lives, or that aim exists, and then you go into that. You see this happening every night as you fall asleep and go to a dream. Something in the mind will come up that attracts you, and then you go for it, and you suddenly find yourself in this other world. And then you take on an identity in that world. This is the process that happens as we dream. a lot of our thinking in the course of the day. How many times in a day have you gone through a becoming like this, where you take on an identity inside a thought world? This is also the process that happens at the end of life. You can't stay in this body anymore, you're getting pushed out. And the mind will conceive of some desire to fight for some other place to go, some other place to be. And then you take on a new identity within that place, good or bad. Finally, craving for non-becoming is wanting to be annihilated. You don't like the becoming you have, you'd like to see it destroyed. You don't like your identity now, you'd like to see it destroyed. And as the Buddha found, if you follow this time of craving, you actually take on the identity of the craver of that particular state of annihilation. That creates new becoming. But there are states of mind where you just blank out totally and everything is obliterated, but they don't last. And then you come back to a state of becoming again. So these are the three desires, the three types of craving. And the Buddha said these are causing suffering. Here it's good to make a parenthetical comment. There are two words that are closely related in Pali: chanda, which is translated as desire, and then danha, which is translated as craving. Now, in each case, both of those words are neutral. You can actually crave awakening and it's okay. You can desire awakening and it's okay, as long as the desire is focused on the proper causes, as long as the craving is focused on the proper causes. So the desire for awakening should be channeled into desiring the causes, which of course would be the path, starting with right view and ending with right concentration. Now, in the path, there are two factors that are very explicitly mentioned desire. One is one called right resolve, which is resolve on renunciation, you resolve on non-ill will, and you resolve on harmlessness. Resolving on renunciation is basically giving up your fascination with sensuality. And for a lot of people, of those three resolves, the second one sounds reasonable. You don't want to have ill will for anybody. The third one sounds attractive. You don't want to harm anybody. That one about not resolving on sensuality, that's hard. But the Buddha's not saying it's going to be total denial. For him to get past sensuality, you have to give the mind an alternative source of happiness. And that would be the pleasure that comes from getting the mind in concentration. And it's okay to desire concentration. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, well, if you don't desire concentration, just allow the mind to naturally settle down. Well, sometimes it'll naturally settle down, and you've probably had experience with it, and it does not naturally settle down. And doesn't mean you just have to sit with whatever's coming up. You have to figure out, okay, why is the mind not settling down? Is it something in the body? Is it something in the mind? Is it something in the feelings I have in the body? These things can be changed. After all, given the fact that your present moment is not a given totally from the past, that you can actually manipulate the potentials coming in from the past. What can you do to manipulate them so you get the mind to settle down? Like we worked with the guided meditation just now. You work with your breath, you work with the feelings of ease that you can develop with the breath. You work with the perception of the breath as a whole body process, so that when the breath gets easeful, you can spread that sense of ease throughout the body. And then you learn how to talk to yourself in a way that encourages you to stay. It encourages you to analyze the breath. What kind of breathing would feel comfortable? When you found something that's comfortable, how do you maintain it? As you maintain it, how do you let it spread? All these are called fabrications, and they're all ways that you can adjust the present moment. So the desire to get the mind in concentration, if you just sit there thinking, I want it to settle down, it's not going to happen. But if you figure out, okay, what are the causes that will enable the mind to want to settle down, then you can manipulate the causes so that you get the results that you want. So that's right resolve. Then there's the other factor, which is called right effort. And here the Buddha explicitly uses the word chanda, desire. You generate desire to prevent unskillful qualities from arising in the mind. You generate the desire. If there are unskillful qualities in the mind, you generate the desire to get rid of them. As for skillful qualities, if they're not there yet, you generate the desire to give rise to them. And once they're there, you generate the desire for them to stay and develop. This is how you develop the path, is based on desire. And then, as the Buddha said, right effort actually hovers around every factor of the path. If there's any factor that's not there, you just figure out, okay, why is it not here? What's getting in the way? And you work with it. So in this way, you're using the whole path as a result of your understanding of cause and effect, so that you can adjust the causes to get the effects that you want. This is based on the principle, as the Buddha said. There were some teachers of his time who taught that everything you experience in the present moment is the result of past actions. And so he would go in and argue with them. The Buddha was not the kind of person who would go around arguing with people in general, but this was the case when he would. He said, you realize what you're teaching people. You're teaching people that whatever comes up, they have no ability to resist it. If they have the urge to kill, okay, they can't resist it. They're going to kill because what comes from the past. So how can you say that people should or should not do certain things if you feel that everything is determined? It's because things are not totally determined that our lives have meaning, that our choice of the path has a meaning and will make a difference in our lives. So you need the desire. The question is, what do you do to motivate the desire? And here the Buddha gives a list, I mentioned it earlier this evening, of 6 things to take delight in and 4 things to determine on. Because when you have a determination, basically you're saying, okay, I want this desire to take precedence over all my other desires. He lists 4 things to be determined on. One of them is to be determined on discernment. That you want to develop the wisdom, you want to develop the knowledge of cause and effect, and particularly what kind of actions, as the Buddha says, will lead to my long-term welfare and happiness, what kind of actions will lead to long-term harm and suffering. And you focus on developing those actions that will lead to long-term happiness. You start out with things like generosity, virtue, meditation, as ways of developing happiness that will last. So that's the first determination, which is discernment. Second determination is truth. In other words, once you know that something is good, you truly stick with it. If you know something is bad, you truly let it go. The third one is relinquishment, basically learning to give up things that will get in the way of the path. And the fourth one is calm. So these 4 things are things that you can aim at, but you also use these qualities. You have to use your discernment to figure out with any course of action, is this going to have what are the long-term consequences going to be? And if it's something that you like doing, but you know the long-term consequences are going to be bad, you have to develop the discernment that you can talk yourself out of it. You'll be able to psych yourself out. So I don't want to do this. As for things that you don't like to do, getting up in a cold morning and meditating, you have to talk yourself into wanting to do it. You have to remind yourself, okay, nobody has ever slept their way to awakening. And you think, okay, there are places in the world that are colder than Portland, and they're meditating there. And you use your sense of being embarrassed a little bit. Okay, I'll get up. Okay, this is an important part of discernment. We hear so much about Buddhist wisdom being about, the wisdom of emptiness, the wisdom of not self, the wisdom of divine co-arising. The Buddha said this is where you really get to practical wisdom, which is how do you talk yourself into getting out of bed in the morning to practice? That's the real test. And so this is how you use your discernment on the path, both to figure out what is a good goal and then how to get yourself, what would be the good way to get there, and also how do you motivate yourself to get there. The same with the quality of truth. You want to be truthful in all of your dealings. This means not only speaking the truth, but also trying to find out, well, what is the actual truth of this particular issue that I'm dealing with. Relinquishment, it's good to see relinquishment as a trade. The Buddha never talks about totally giving anything up and then being deprived. He said there are things when you give them up, you actually benefit from giving them up, and you want to focus on that benefit, which helps with that fourth quality of calm. Because calm here means not only getting the mind calm in concentration, but also the deeper calm that comes from letting go of its defilements. So these are all things that you can determine on, that you say, this is what I really want out of my life. And it goes against a lot of the desires of the world. Seeing discernment and looking at your actions in terms of the long-term consequences. Most people don't like to think about the long-term consequences. So I just want what I want right now, as fast as I can get it. As for truth, there are a lot of people who say, well, if I can't get what I want by being honest, I got to get it some other way. Relinquishment, whoever dies with those toys wins. Problem is, whoever dies with those toys still dies. You can't take the toys with you. But the world is focused on its toys. And when you're focused on your toys like that, although you're afraid other people will take your toys away, this is why we have wars. People can't learn how to give up. As for calm, most people don't aim at calm, they aim at variety. They want as much variety and as much new changes as they can accumulate. So as you determine on these four determinations that the Buddha recommends, you're going against a lot of the currents of the world. Which means that you have to learn how to psych yourself up to maintain this determination that you're not going to just keep falling back in the ways of the people around you. And this is where we get into those 6 sources of delight that I mentioned earlier this evening. One is delighting in the Dharma, that there is a teaching that points out what really should be done, what kind of actions really will give good results, what kind of actions will give bad results. The Buddha said his foremost duty as a teacher was to give you a strong sense that there are things that should be done and things that should not be done. Now, he didn't tell you all the things that should and should not be done, but he gave you the principles for deciding what should and shouldn't be done, so you can decide for yourself. And it's good to have that kind of Dharma. It gives you some confidence that you can build on the knowledge of the people who come before you. Secondly, this delight in abandoning. Most of us don't delight in abandoning our desires, we delight in trying to fulfill them. But there are certain desires that are going to be unskillful, so you learn how to say, I can learn how to get past this. Now, it may take a lot of effort, and you may find yourself having some setbacks. But if you can psych yourself up that this was something to be really good to master, and have a sense of accomplishment with this. We'll be talking this weekend about the sense of agency that goes into right effort, that goes into desire. It involves a sense of you, your self-worth, your enjoyment of agency, that I can make a difference. Back in the beginning of the 20th century, there was a psychologist, I've forgotten his name now, who did a study of infant behavior. And he said, you know what makes infants happiest? If they can do something again and again and again and get the same results. This is the kind of thing that drives us crazy about infants, right? But what makes them happy about this is they see, one, they are agents. They can make causes that will have a predictable result. And that's one of the things that makes us happy. If you live in a world where you do things and there's no predictable result, it drives you crazy. They've done experiments with pigeons. You have a green bar and a red bar. And if you press the green bar, you get food, and if you press the red bar, you don't get food. Now the pigeons in that cage are happy. They know how to feed. They just press the green bar. They had another cage where pigeons had a green bar and a red bar. And sometimes if you pressed the green bar, you got food, and sometimes you didn't. And sometimes you pressed the red bar and you got food, and sometimes you didn't. Those pigeons turned neurotic. So what makes us happy is that we can figure out causality and get the results we want. So you might say, the path to awakening starts with You can do it again and again and again, you get the results. And so learning how to take joy in this agency that you have is an important part of the path. When the Buddha talks about the sense of self, he doesn't say abandon your sense of self from the beginning. He says learn how to depend on yourself. Make yourself reliable. Have a sense of that you are competent to do this and that you will benefit from it. And that you can look at your own actions. You don't need anybody else to tell you when you're getting bad results. You can begin to train yourself to see that I'm getting good results from this. All of this is a healthy sense of self. Don't let go of your sense of self until it's healthy and done the work. So this is the joy that comes in abandoning unskillful qualities and developing skillful qualities. So those are the second and third sources of delight. The fourth source of delight is seclusion. Learning how to delight in seclusion is an important part of this because you have to have some time by yourself so you can watch your own mind. And it's not easy because you start watching your mind and you don't like what you see. And the Buddha's not saying, well, just learn to accept whatever comes up and be okay with it. He's saying, you have to try to figure out if there's something you don't like in your mind, why is it there? There's a cause and you can figure it out. But you need some seclusion in order to do that, because otherwise, as Wordsworth said, the world is too much with us, and just so much. When we're at the monastery, we don't have much in terms of the media. But everybody's coming and saying, the election, the election, the election, as if that were the only thing in the world right now. There's so many other things you've got to focus on in terms of your own behavior that you're responsible for. And you want to maintain that sense of, okay, I have to be responsible for my behavior. I can't be responsible for other people's behavior. But if I'm not responsible for my own behavior, that's really irresponsible. So I got to learn how to be responsible for myself. So I got to know myself. Finally, the two other things that the Buddha recommends that you delight in is the fact that the goal of this path is one where there is no affliction of anybody. You're not harming anybody. You're not harming yourself. Nibbana is totally unafflicted. And then finally, it's what's called non-objectification. Objectification of the word papancha, you may have heard this. In Vipassana circles, they talk about having papancha attacks, where you're sitting meditating and all you can do is just spin out thoughts. Well, if the Buddha uses the word papancha, he doesn't mean the quantity of your thinking, he means the quality and the types of terms in which you're thinking. And papancha basically is a set of perceptions that starts with I am the thinker, and once you take on that identity, you have to, as a being, you have to feed. And when you have to feed, you have to find a source of food, and there are other beings that are also looking for that source of food. There's going to be conflict. So if you learn how not to take on that identity, that's part of what Nibbana is all about. You finally find a happiness where you don't need an identity. That means you're not going to be looking for food for any other place, because you don't need food at that point. And so there's no conflict. And so you delight in the fact that you're on a path, you look in this world and you see so much conflict over and over and over again. You say, I'm going someplace where there is no conflict. And it's not that I'm abandoning the world, I'm setting a good example for the rest of the world. They can go there too. As the Buddha said, there's enough room in Nibbana for everybody. So these are the things you learn how to delight in, so you can motivate yourself to stick with the path, maintain your desire to master whatever has to be mastered, and to let go of whatever needs to be let go. So this is what Ananda was doing that night. He wasn't just giving up. He said, okay, the time had come for him to lie down, but he didn't just lie down and say, that's it. He lay down mindfully with a sense of keeping watch over his mind and being alert to what was going on. And perhaps one of the problems was that evening he was so focused on the goal that he wasn't looking at the steps of what he was doing. But when he started looking at the steps of what he was doing, then he learned how to do it properly. So the next day he appeared at the meeting. They say he levitated in just to show, hey, I finally got there. But to get there, you have to focus on the proper steps. This is what it means to use causality, to focus your desires, educate them in terms of causality so you can desire things that are skillful and actually accomplish those things, bring them into being. So when you cross the river, you end up letting go of the raft after you cross, but while you're on the river, you hold on. You make an effort. You get across. And as the Buddha said, when you get across, when you let go of your sense of self, when you let go of all your other attachments, it's not with a sense of disgust, it's a sense of appreciation that I've trained my sense of self. I trained my desires, so they got me here. Now I don't need them anymore. I appreciate them, but I've gone beyond them. That's the proper attitude that you want to take to training your desires along the path. So those are some of the thoughts I had for tonight. Be curious if you have any questions. Curious what you're doing. The Dhamma, abandoning, developing. Third one's developing, yeah. Walking mic. Mm-hmm. I think we'll grab a walking mic.
It's for the people online. Okay. A couple of times you talked about the four, I think it's the Iddhipadas, the spiritual powers, specifically about concentration, and you sort of said it's implied it's not really about succeeding in general. That I was taught that it was sort of good for success in many ways. Is that not from the Pali Canon?
It's a perfectly good use of the teaching. Because you think about it, you need desire, persistence, intent, and using your powers of analysis. I mean, any skill that you're going to develop, you're going to need these four things. So it's a perfectly legitimate application of the teaching.
But it's specifically for concentration that you're
in the beginning, and when the Buddha talked about it, it was about concentration.
Okay. Thank you.
But you can, you have a blanket. It was designed for you to use as you sleep, but you wear it around outside. There's nothing wrong with the blanket. You can put it to other uses. The question doesn't have to be on topic. Yeah.
I was sort of tempted to go home and study to make sure I frame this question correctly, but we're here now. I think I remember one of your talks, the short talks that you give in the evenings that are available on the podcast. I think I remember a talk a few months ago where you talked about delight in a different sense, as something we kind of want to let go of. This sort of, if I understood and remember correctly, it's something like, when we take delight in something, we're sort of investing something in it, like similar to what you talked about with fantasy. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about these two senses of delight, or whether they're different concepts or related.
It's the same concept. It's simply remembering that there's so many things that eventually you're going to give up, but you have to use them in the meantime before you give them up, like the raft. Delight, when the Buddha talks about it in the negative sense, is that when you're trying to find pleasure in something and you have to dress it up, and you say, boy, that's really good. Isn't that really cool? Yeah, that pizza last night, that was really, really good. And so you can encourage yourself to get another pizza, basically. And when you get to Nibbana, you don't have to tell yourself how good it is. Because for so many of our pleasures in the world, if we don't dress them up, we begin to realize this is pretty empty. And Nibbana doesn't need dressing up. So in that case, once you get there, you don't have to delight in it. Now they do talk about the Buddha delighting in solitude and all these other things. And so if you want to delight, you can, but in terms of, there's no need for delight anymore at that point, which is why they've said that arahants are beyond delight. But as we're on the path, there are times when, it's going to be difficult. And you have to know how to give yourself encouragement. The image that occurs to me is when I was in Thailand, we didn't have knife sharpeners. We had a whetstone. And if you're going to sharpen a knife, you had to be very careful about the amount of pressure you put on the blade and be consistent in everything. And so you have to talk to yourself and say, this is really cool, I'm mastering this skill, it's really great, yeah, I'm getting this down. So you can get the knife. So those are times like that when you, and with the concentration, you're sitting there meditating, and then the mosquitoes are biting you and your legs are hurting and your mind is a mess. You say, okay, at least I'm doing something, putting in effort. The results are going to have to pay off at some point. So in that case, you have to delight in the path in order to keep yourself going. But with Nibbana, you don't have to keep anything going.
I'm glad you mentioned self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like very important to have a healthy sense of self when you practice. Being too critical to yourself, is that another side of ego? Another side of being like pride sort of thing?
It's a combination of pride and also just a misuse of your self-critical faculties. We talk about training the self, and that's part of yourself you're going to have to train. How to criticize yourself in a way that's effective. And so you have to tell yourself when you're getting really negative, really down on yourself, says, look, I don't want criticism that's not helpful. If this is just tearing me down, I don't want this at all. And you can tell your inner critic, okay, I'm not going to listen to you until you're helpful. Grow up. Because you can't totally abandon your critical faculties, your inner critic. And we all need the inner critic as a governing principle in our actions. So that without it, we can't learn. Think about the Buddha training Rahula. Rahula was 7 years old. He said, okay, look at your actions. You look at your intentions. If you think they're going to be harmful, you don't do them. Look at your actions while you're doing them. If it's causing harm, you stop. Or you look at the long-term results and you realize you caused harm over the long term, you resolve not to repeat it again. He's training your inner critic to be constructive.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was curious what role faith plays in this discernment process of wholesome desire and unwholesome desire.
A huge role. I had a student one time who had Marfan syndrome. And I don't know if you know about Marfan syndrome. It's a connective tissue disease where your connective tissue just breaks. And a lot of these people who have this, it's a hereditary condition. They will die around age 20 or so, a heart attack or a stroke or something. And it's a very long story, but she managed to live into her 50s. She had a really bad stroke. And then as she was recovering from the stroke, her first public event was going to be a talk that I was going to give in a nearby Dharma center. So I asked her, what would you like to hear? She said, faith. I said, Cheryl, faith is the F word in Buddhism. But for your sake, I'll give the talk. It's on Audio Dharma, audiodharma.org. It's called Faith and Ardency. And as I made the point that night, there are going to be fallow periods in your meditation when things are not progressing or things are actually seem to be regressing. You've got to have faith, okay, there's got to be a way out of this. You look at the five, what they call the five faculties or the five strengths. The very first one is conviction, which is another word for faith. And it's through that faith that you get discernment. The conviction, there's got to be a way out, so I'm going to find it. If you don't have that conviction, you give up easily. So it means having faith in the Dharma and also faith in yourself. The Buddha taught human beings, I'm a human being. This is where you bring in that conceit that was mentioned in one of the readings. Other people can do this. Why can't I? So that's what pulls you through. I gave that talk. The energy in the room was so negative. I had to focus on Cheryl and give the talk for her. And forget about everybody else. But it is important, it plays a very important role. Because you look at the Four Noble Truths, I mean, there's a lot of, it's very counterintuitive. The idea that you can totally put an end to suffering, I haven't seen that yet, you say? So you have to have faith in the Buddha, okay, it must be possible. And I'm going to have to learn how to give up these cravings I'm really attached to and these clingings I'm really attached to. It requires faith. And not just faith, but this is why the Buddha would give reasons for his teaching, so that it seemed reasonable at least. But even that's not proof, but at least get you going. I began the talk by saying, okay, I want a show of hands. How many people in here find that every day and every way their practice is getting better and better? No hands. So as I said, that you need faith to take you through those fallow periods.
Thank you.
Ajahn, is the negativity around faith just the Judeo-Christian overlay that we have in the West? Is it just the translation?
I think it has to do with our Judeo-Christian background.
Because faith is essentially confidence.
It's confidence,
Right.
and when we're taught that you have to have faith in things that don't make sense or are unreasonable, then you start reacting. Now, the Buddha's not asking you to have faith in anything unreasonable.
Yeah.
And so in places like Thailand, I mean, nobody has big issues around this. They say this makes perfect sense. So I think it's a lot of our sense of having been burned
Yeah.
and it's shying away. Which is why I tend not to use the word faith. I use the word conviction.
Conviction, okay, that's how you translate it. And is that where sort of getting more familiar or using the Pali terms for some of these concepts comes, for me, it comes in handy because it just lets go of whatever.
It doesn't have the
It
emotional
doesn't have that baggage.
yeah. But then you talk to people about sattva and they say, what the hell?
People got a problem with everything.
Because you got to, at some point, you got to translate it.
Right.
Yeah. So as I said, I use conviction.
Conviction, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me? Ajahn, I want to first express my gratitude for this opportunity to sit with you and for guiding us. I take a lot of pleasure from my practice. In fact, it's the most delightful part of my life. The rest is all dukkha. But at this point, I feel like an 80-year-old stuck in the Disneyland. I have a strong desire for leaving the Disneyland. It doesn't appeal to me anymore. And I feel like I'm doing something wrong because the desire for practice and freedom is there. I don't know what is happening right now.
What's the Disneyland aspect that you're trying to get away from?
I think it's samsara, all the rides of things that may, when I was younger, felt pleasurable and now they don't. If it's sensual pleasure, other things, success, all these things that used to appeal and they don't appeal anymore.
Okay, well, you may want to figure out some way that you can rearrange your life so that you can spend less time in Disneyland and more time something more mature. Because the practice isn't necessarily something that you just fit into the cracks of your life. Sometimes you say, I've got to expand my life or change my life as a result of this.
I was wondering if I have clinging to becoming or not becoming. Maybe I want this enlightenment way too much. Maybe I'm clinging to stream entry too much to the point that I'm stopping myself from getting it. It's not that I get on the rides on the Disneyland. I'm just looking for a way out of the Disneyland and I can't find it.
Okay. I mean, the Buddha didn't find the way out by giving up on his desire for awakening. The question is, how do you use this desire in the most skillful way? So try to use your imagination of how you could change your life so that you can have more time for the practice.
Well, I already set like between 2 to 4 hours a day. I gave up a full-time job. I'm doing part-time work and I'm fully in, like my chitta is dedicated to the path. I think it might be just the discomfort of this passion. I don't really know where I am on the map. But what do you do with this passion when it arises and you're
With
confused?
this passion, you say, okay, I have to be passionate about something good. And as for dispassion for the rest of the world, you say that's the normal part of the practice. You may want to find a community of people that are sort of like-minded to give you a greater sense of balance and some more wholeness to your practice. So it's not just you off doing something by yourself.
Thank you. I was just wondering if maybe I'm clinging to non-becoming in a way. Or,
Well, you have to have some clinging in the path. I think your problem is you're clinging to your impatience.
to my what?
Impatience.
Ah, that sounds true, actually.
Okay, well, I hope it's helpful.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's a question here.
I understand being impatient. I do that a lot too. But like, back to faith, just because it's popped into my mind when everybody's talking about it. I also have a very strong reaction to the word faith and the concept of faith. And one thing that's been helpful to me with not necessarily Dharma, with like other stuff, is being open to the potential of something working. Like, it's kind of what scientists do when they're doing experimenting. Like, they have a hypothesis, they run an experiment, and they're like, oh, did this work? Did this not work? Why didn't it work? Or why did it work? And like, I started doing it with allergies and stuff. And I've heard another teacher, like Buddhist teacher, be like, be open to something working. Like, that could be part of faith. Like, something will happen. Be open to something happening.
Well, I like to use the term working hypothesis. It's a little bit more focus than just being open to something happening. Yeah. Say, okay, this is a hypothesis, I'm going to hold on to this and see what happens. Because it does require a certain tenacity.
Thank you. Glad you're here. And I want to ask something about simple pleasures. You talk about sensual pleasures, and implicit is just really intense desires. But then today was a beautiful day. I went to the park and saw the leaves, and this is very peaceful. I was really enjoying the sensation, and something like that. You can't convince me that that's not skillful. So,
I'm not going to try.
Where does one draw the line?
I'm not going to try. You draw the line by saying, if I enjoy this pleasure, what impact does it have on my mind? If it has an innocent impact, there's no problem. And the Buddha says, look at Majjhima 101. And the Buddha says this, okay, we don't deny pleasures that are in line with the Dharma. So whatever you find, like the pleasure of a harmonious community, the pleasure of nature. There are lots of pleasures that are perfectly innocent. But there are other pleasures that are more sort of personal issues. Some people will enjoy a particular pleasure and it won't have a bad impact on the mind. Other people, it really pulls them in. And so those are the cases where you have to look at yourself. This particular pleasure, what impact does it have on my mind? And what do I have to learn how to say no to? Yeah, they're simple. Which is why the Buddha didn't say sensory pleasures are bad. It's sensuality, which is this fascination with, thinking and thinking and thinking and working and thinking about tonight's pizza. Do I want pepperoni? Do I not want pepperoni? How about?
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is also about practice and a fallow period, and actually my sitting meditation. I feel like I'm seeing and appreciating where the Dhamma has really become much more, I see it more, and I'm more aware of how I connect and think about the Dhamma and my behaviors during the day and when I'm active and in life. And that's been very satisfying. I catch myself speaking, maybe refraining from saying things. But lately, it's been really challenging on the cushion, and the breath-based has been particularly challenging. So I'm trying to go through tools, and then I get a little self-critical about, well, you're not going to let it go on a long, you should do this so long to make sure a tool's working or not. I guess I'd welcome any advice about how to address this, because I also am getting then, that kind of cycle of, here I am again, this cushion thing may not work, if I don't get quick results. So I just welcome.
Okay, a part of it is reminding yourself that the more carefully you pay attention to what's going on, the more interesting it's going to get. And there is a tendency sometimes just to kind of go through the motions and say, well, I'm scratching, but it's not where I itch. And so you ask yourself, well, where do I itch? What would I really like right now? And when my mind is not settling down, what exactly is happening? Because all the things you're going to need to know are happening right here. Then if you can't get interested in your own mind, what are you going to be interested in? Yeah. But a lot of times I found that when things start getting foul, I've just been kind of going through the motions and not really paying careful attention to what I'm doing. The other thing is ask different questions. This is when it's useful to read some of the different Ajahns. Ajahn Mahabhu is good at asking strange questions of himself. And so you get some ideas, okay, what questions am I not asking myself that I could ask?
If I may, just one follow-up check-in also. Early on in my practice, I felt some success, if you will, in terms of just calming and getting present with a mantra. And it might be each time I found often, or maybe it'd go for a week or two, is some word or brief thought that just seemed to help things settle, help my body physically relax and settle, but still maintain energy. Is that still a skill, or is that a skillful approach?
Sure.
Okay.
And just because it was a beginning approach doesn't mean you don't go back to the beginning every now and then. Okay.
Ajahn, my mom had a question that I'll try to ask. She got a question about relationships between her and her brother's daughter. So in the past, when she was 8, 9 years old, my mom spent a lot of time with her, basically being a second mother, because her mother committed suicide when she was 8. And then there was a pretty big gap, about 15 years or 10 years when they were sporadically in contact. And then she spent about 9 months living with her and friends. So during that time, she experienced a lot of, I would say, unskillful behavior from that person. And she's my cousin. And together with good things, but a lot of also unskillful thinking, some aggressiveness towards her, and that was very unpleasant. So the question is how to, at the same time, she understands, she sees how much she suffers, how much challenges she's going through in her family, things like that. So how to not to become cold and sort of unreceptive to that person after that experience of living with her and experiencing behavior sort of. I guess that's the question, how to keep yourself not cold to the person.
Well, you let her know that, okay, if you ever need my help, I'm there. But I'm here. In other words, you stay where you don't force yourself on her, but let her know if you ever need help, let me know. And try to establish that, get that message across in whatever way is most effective. But saying, I'm not going to impose myself on you, but if there's any help that you need, let me know. And then you're not going to be giving her everything she wants, but just say, we can talk things over. So you say, I'm available, but I'll be at a distance.
Okay. Thank you.
Ajahn, I'm a person who likes a lot of solitude, needs a lot of solitude, but I also find tremendous benefit from being in community with like-minded Dhamma friends, and I find weekends like this, when there's a bunch of people, can be really draining. And is there a way to keep the energy up, keep the willingness up to benefit from the community?
Okay, well, you have to learn how to create a breath shield. In other words, think of your breath energy filling your body, your awareness filling your body as you go into the group. And think of it kind of being like a magnetic field, that you're not being invaded by their energies. And that way you can be with community and talk with people, but not pick up whatever frenetic energy that comes from having a lot of people around. Are you old enough to have seen commercials for Gardol?
No.
No.
I don't believe so.
It's these old Colgate commercials where they have, all these germs in the air and they come up and all of a sudden this big clear plastic shield appears in front of your mouth and repels the germs.
I'll look it up. But I think I understand.
But the basic idea, you've got this energy field that you want to maintain. And there is a tendency when you're with other people to want to bring their energy in, so as you feel that they can, as proof to yourself that you're sympathizing with them and you feel you don't need to do that. You've got your own energy space and you inhabit it and nobody else can penetrate. That's a lot easier to be with a lot of other people.
Hello. Could you talk a little bit about generosity, the generosity of spirit as regards to Buddhism? I see so much of it. Like you're here today with us, and the generosity you're, providing with teachings, and Matthew, and so many around me here, and just what the Buddha's feelings about that were.
Oh my gosh, it's the beginning of all your spiritual practice. For one reason, think back on your childhood when you gave something out of your generosity of your heart without having to, it wasn't Christmas and it wasn't somebody's birthday, but you just gave it because you wanted to. That was your first experience of freedom of choice. I could keep it, but I don't have to. I want to give it. And you sense the long-term benefits, that you feel better having given it than you did if you used it yourself. That's the beginning of the practice. Okay, I'm going to have to give before I get. And I'm happy to give because I know there's going to be some good long-term benefits coming from that. And then, the Buddha went so far to say, if you're stingy, there's no way you're going to get into jhana, there's no way you're going to get awakened. It's that important.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Ajahn. I'm a visitor. It's my first time. I come from the Catholic Christian tradition, but up until age around 21, 22, I've stepped out of the box, so to speak. I attended Catholic Mass until I was 42 years old. Went through a divorce. I'm going to try to be concise here, but I was blessed by being in a Catholic parish for actually two different communities that were much more progressive, open-minded, and it was there that I met other fellow people who talked to me about Buddhist teachers and Thich Nhat Hanh and Pema Chodron, and I feel my path is difficult in that I don't know if I'm trying to, I feel like one of the, the story of the three bears, where I'm looking for the most perfect mattress bed to find, or there's a term I think that was floated around, I heard a decade or so ago, about hot tub theology, about trying to find the perfect place that is the best match. And I get excited when I'm in my context of the foundation, my Catholic Christian foundation, and I'm inspired by a teacher. Father Thomas Keating was a Trappist monk, and he brought centering prayer, which is basically meditation. It's known worldwide now. There's groups all over the world, and that's been something that I've been starting to practice more and more and listen to the teachings. But after not attending or being a part of a community for about 10 or 15 years, I felt a real thought it was a genuine calling to go back to a Catholic church. And I did about 9 months ago. And now I'm having second thoughts about being there, even though I see the good, but I also see things that trigger me, make me angry. We all know about the scandals and everything else, but I also see a lot of good with their compassion. And a lot of Catholic churches have food closets and pantries and just really good people with simple values. And yet, I still just feel like I'm a seeker and I can't really find a home, so to speak, unless I think the place I call home is in centering prayer and meditation and the teachings around that. And so I guess I'm just sharing with you confusion and why it has to be that way, I guess. I'm not quite sure. Thank you.
I don't know what to say.
That was a lot.
Yeah. You want to find a community of people who are like-minded, and you want to find a community where that encourages that kind of inner contemplation. And so keep looking. There are communities out there. They may not be Catholic, but
There's one statement I left out. I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm not sure about that, but he said, stay where you're at, and stay where you're at, and to grow there, I guess. And so, I don't know, just...
but you're going to have to find a community that's like-minded. So keep looking.
Thank you.
One last question. Did it? Oh, no.
So this is a practice question. I really enjoyed your guided meditation today, but I have a difficult time with visualization. So when you say things like visualize the breath going down the spine, I have a very difficult time with that. So I look for sensation instead. And then I get kind of overwhelmed by all the other physical sensations that kind of pop up from there. So I kind of focus on like the area more than anything. But is there a way to break through that barrier of visualization, like not really being super present for my practice?
There's going to have to be some amount of visualization when you deal with the body.
Very little. I guess when it comes to like those, like the breath going down the spine, it's a lot of black in my head, I guess. And so I kind of like, I try and visualize sensation, I suppose, more than anything. Like, do I feel, and then I feel like I'm kind of making it up.
Okay, well, part of it is just saying, what do I actually feel in my spine? How do I locate what I'm feeling in my spine? Where is my spine right now? Yeah, I mean, I'm serious. Where is it right now in your awareness?
So when it comes to the front of the body, that's much easier. It's the back of the body that's for some reason very difficult. So I can focus on that a little bit, see if I can at least find it.
Yeah,
It's pretty numb.
I'll find it because I mean when I started out with this, I mean the concept of breath energy in the body was intriguing, but I wasn't 100% sure that I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, I think that's.
But I
where
did
I'm at.
begin to find that by sensing my body, what it looked like and what it felt like from inside were two very different things. Like my shoulder was missing.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
so you have to ask yourself, okay, what do I sense? Well, I knew where my neck was and I knew where my lower arm was. So okay, there's something between my neck and my lower arm.
Something's holding it together.
Where is it? And it actually, I had this feeling that my shoulder was out here. And so I just was like, I'll be wearing my shoulder out there for a while. And then after a while, it began to come together.
Bring it all in. And I practiced Vipassana for a while, and one of the things that I would use is find like the itch, or like, you know, if it's my shirt touching like the certain area in order to even figure it out where it is. And you know, of course, I'm always questioning, is that proper, or am I actually searching for like the spinal cord or like the tailbone, something deeper inside rather than just what's kind of touching
Yeah.
the body?
You do want to get inside the body as much as you can. And it's going to take a while to get a sense of what's where and how it's all connected. And so explore, well, when I close my eyes, what do I actually feel? What shape does it seem to have to me?
Potato shaped?
Whatever.
Whatever. It just takes practice. Yeah.
Take some time
Thank you.
and some curiosity.
Very curious.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that'll be enough for tonight. Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and end the Zoom meeting now.